The conference room fell completely silent as Professor Martinez finished reading the plagiarism report aloud. 23 pages of meticulously documented evidence. Every email, every draft, every late-night research session, proving that the groundbreaking thesis everyone had been praising belonged to me. I watched as David's face went from confident smugness to complete horror. The same David who had been my research partner for 2 years. The same David who I'd trusted with everything. The same David who had stolen 9 months of my life's work and submitted it as his own. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Emily Johnson, and 18 months ago, I was just another graduate student grinding through my doctorate in behavioral psychology at Northwestern University. I'd been working toward this degree for 4 years, and I was finally in the home stretch, researching social media's impact on adolescent decision-making patterns. It was cutting-edge stuff, the kind of research that could define an entire career. I'd always been the type to put my head down and work. While other grad students were networking at department mixers or playing politics with professors, I was in the lab until midnight. My apartment was basically a satellite office. Books stacked everywhere, whiteboards covered in research notes, my laptop permanently overheating from statistical analysis programs. My advisor, Dr. Rodriguez, had always said I had the most methodical research approach she'd ever seen. I documented everything. Every interview session, every data point, every theoretical connection. I kept backup files of backup files. My friends used to joke that I could probably recreate my entire graduate education from my filing system alone. The psychology department at Northwestern was notorious for its competitive atmosphere. We had 120 graduate students, all fighting for maybe 15 professor positions that might open up nationwide each year. The pressure was intense. Students would guard their research topics like state secrets, afraid someone might steal their ideas or publish similar findings first. Which is why I was so surprised when David Morrison approached me at the department coffee shop that September morning. David was everything I wasn't. Charismatic, politically connected, the kind of guy who seemed to know every professor's research interests and funding sources. He was working on social media psychology too, but from a different angle, focusing on addiction patterns rather than decision-making. "Emily, right," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I've been reading about your work on adolescent decision-making. Really impressive stuff." I looked up from my laptop, genuinely surprised. Most students barely acknowledged each other's work unless they had to. "Thanks," I said carefully. "Your addiction research is interesting too. I saw your presentation last month." David leaned forward, his eyes lighting up. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. I think our research could be incredibly complementary. Decision-making and addiction patterns. They're two sides of the same coin when it comes to social media usage." He was right, and I knew it. I'd been struggling with some gaps in my theoretical framework, specifically around why certain decision-making patterns seem to correlate with addictive behaviors. If we could combine our data sets and approaches, we might have something revolutionary. "What are you proposing?" I asked Dot. "A joint thesis project. We pool our research, share our data, and create something neither of us could build alone. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim could co-advise. We'd both get credit, both get published. It's a win-win." I should have been more cautious. In that department, Collaboration was rare for good reason, but David seemed genuinely excited about the academic possibilities, not just the career advantages. And honestly, I was lonely. 4 years of solitary research had taken its toll. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course." "But Sarah." He stood up, gathering his coffee. "I really think we could do something special together." That night, I called my best friend Jessica, who was finishing her own PhD at Stanford. "It sounds too good to be true," she said immediately. "You know what they say about things that sound too good to be true." "But Rach, the research potential is incredible. And I've been working alone for so long. Maybe it's time to take a risk." "Just be careful. Document everything. And I mean everything." Rachel's advice turned out to be more prophetic than either of us realized. I agreed to David's proposal the next week. We set up a shared workspace in the department, complete with whiteboards, filing cabinets, and 2 desks pushed together. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim were both enthusiastic about the collaboration, calling it exactly the kind of innovative thinking the field needed. The first few months were incredible. David brought an energy and creativity to the work that I'd never experienced. Where I was methodical and careful, he was intuitive and bold. Where I got bogged down in statistical significance, he saw the bigger theoretical picture. We worked 12-hour days and loved every minute of it. We developed a system where I handled most of the data collection and analysis, while David focused on theoretical framework and literature review. Every evening, we'd compare notes and plan the next day's work. I'd go home exhausted but exhilarated, feeling like we were building something truly groundbreaking. Our research was showing that social media platforms weren't just accidentally addictive. They were systematically designed to exploit specific decision-making vulnerabilities in adolescent brains. The implications for policy and education were enormous. We were sitting on research that could influence how schools approach technology, how parents manage screen time, how platforms design their interfaces. David was brilliant at seeing connections I missed. He'd look at my data analysis and say things like, "But Emily, look at this correlation here. What if the addiction patterns aren't just about frequency of use, but about the specific timing of dopamine hits during decision-making moments?" You're right. He was right. Again and again, he was right. I started to feel like the junior partner in our collaboration, which should have been my first warning sign. By January, we had enough material for 2 dissertations. Our shared Google Drive had over 300 documents, research notes, interview transcripts, statistical analyses, theoretical frameworks. We'd presented preliminary findings at 2 conferences and had interest from 3 major psychology journals. That's when David started changing. It was subtle at first. He'd arrive at our workspace later and leave earlier. He stopped contributing to our shared documents, but would still review everything I added. When I asked about his progress on the literature review, he'd say he was working on it at home, where he could concentrate better. "David, we're supposed to be partners," I said one February afternoon. "I feel like I'm doing most of the work lately." "Sorry, Emily. I've been dealing with some family stuff. I'll get back on track next week." Next week came and went. Then the week after that. By March, I was essentially working alone again, but still sharing every discovery, every breakthrough, every late-night insight with David. I started noticing other things too. David would ask detailed questions about my methodology. Questions that seemed designed to understand not just what I was finding, but exactly how I was finding it. He'd request copies of my raw data files for backup purposes. Something feels off about David, I told Rachel during one of our weekly calls. Off how? She asked. I can't put my finger on it. He's just different, less collaborative. More extractive, I guess. Trust your instincts, Emily. You're one of the most perceptive people I know. But I didn't trust my instincts. I trusted David. I trusted our partnership. I trusted that we were building something together. I was such an idiot. The betrayal came on a Thursday morning in April. I arrived at our workspace to find David's desk completely cleared out. No note, no explanation. Just empty drawers and clean surfaces. I immediately called his cell phone. Straight to voicemail. I tried his apartment. No answer. I even asked around the department, but nobody had seen him. That afternoon, Dr. Rodriguez called me into her office. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something, she said, closing the door behind me. Her expression was serious, almost grim. Is everything okay? I asked Dot. David Morrison submitted his thesis defense proposal yesterday, she said slowly. For a solo project. The room seemed to tilt. What do you mean, solo project? Sarah. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. The research he's proposing to defend. It looks exactly like the work you two have been doing together. But he's listed as the sole researcher. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's impossible. We've been working together for 8 months. All that research, all those late nights. That's our work. Trocat. I know, Dr. Rodriguez said. But according to his proposal, you were just a research assistant. He's claiming the theoretical framework, the methodology, the data analysis. All of it. The next few minutes were a blur. Dr. Rodriguez explaining that David had already scheduled his defense, that he'd submitted drafts of his work to the committee, that 3 professors had already agreed to serve on his defense panel. What can I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Honestly, Emily, this is going to be complicated. In academic disputes like this, it often comes down to documentation. Can you prove your contributions to the research? Could I prove it? I walked back to our workspace in a daze, my mind racing through months of collaboration. Then I sat down at my computer and started going through our shared files. That's when I realized the full scope of David's betrayal. Our shared Google Drive was empty. 300 documents, gone. 8 months of research, disappeared. Every collaboration, every shared insight, every joint breakthrough, vanished. David hadn't just stolen my work. He'd systematically erased any evidence that I'd contributed to it. I called Rachel, barely able to speak through my tears. He deleted everything, Rach. Our entire shared workspace. It's like our partnership never existed. Oh, Emily. Rachel's voice was soft with sympathy. I'm so sorry. But wait. You said you document everything. Don't you have backup files? I did. I had backup files of backup files. But what David didn't know was that my obsessive documentation went far beyond just research data. I documented everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, going through 4 years of digital history. Email threads, calendar invites, shared document revision histories. screenshots I'd taken of interesting data correlations, photos from our workspace, text messages about research ideas. What I found was better than I could have hoped for. David had been thorough, but he wasn't as tech-savvy as he thought. While he'd deleted our shared Google Drive, he couldn't delete my local backup files. He couldn't delete the email threads where we discussed theoretical approaches. He couldn't delete the revision history that showed which passages of our research I'd written. Most importantly, he couldn't delete the timestamps. Nah. Every document had metadata. Creation dates, modification dates, author information. And what those timestamps showed was a clear pattern. I had created the foundational documents for our research 3 months before David and I had even started collaborating. I had been working on social media and decision-making research since my second year. I had interview transcripts dated 8 months before our partnership. I had statistical analyses with my name in the file properties. I had theoretical frameworks saved in my personal drive, with creation dates that predated our collaboration by half a year. David had thought he was stealing current work. What he'd actually done was steal 2 years of my research and claim it as his own. But I needed more than just digital evidence. I needed witnesses. I needed proof of our collaboration that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. I started with our conference presentations. David and I had presented joint research at the Midwestern Psychology Conference in February. There were hundreds of witnesses, conference programs with both our names, photos from the presentation, video recordings that the conference had made for their archives. Then I reached out to Dr. Kim, David's former advisor. Dr. Kim, this is Emily Johnson. I'm wondering if you could help me with something. Do you still have the emails where David and I discussed our joint research project? Antrataso. Dr. Kim was immediately helpful. Within an hour, she'd forwarded me 6 months of email correspondence, detailed discussions about methodology, theoretical frameworks, data sharing protocols. Every email clearly showed a collaborative partnership, with both David and me contributing ideas and analysis. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. I remembered that David had asked me to help him with a grant application back in February. He needed someone with statistical analysis experience to review his funding proposal. I'd spent an entire weekend helping him refine his methodology section and had saved drafts of my suggestions. What I found in those grant documents made my hands shake. David had submitted a grant proposal for novel research into social media addiction patterns, but the methodology section was almost word for word identical to research I'd been conducting for 18 months. Not just similar, identical. He'd copied my statistical approaches, my interview protocols, even my theoretical citations. The grant proposal was dated 3 weeks before he'd approached me about collaboration. He hadn't wanted a research partner. He'd wanted access to my work. Now I understood his game. David had realized that his own research wasn't strong enough for a competitive dissertation, so he'd identified the most promising work in the department, my work, and positioned himself to steal it. The fake collaboration had been his strategy from day one. I spent the next 2 weeks building an airtight case. I created a timeline showing the development of my research, with dated documents proving I'd been working on these ideas long before our partnership. I compiled email evidence showing our collaborative relationship. I gathered witness statements from professors and fellow students who could testify to my independent work. But I also did something else. Something David wouldn't expect. I contacted the 3 professors who had agreed to serve on his defense committee. Dr. Martinez from the statistics department, Dr. Johnson from social psychology, Dr. Williams from developmental psychology. I didn't accuse David of plagiarism. I simply asked if I could present my own research on social media and decision-making. Research I'd been conducting independently for 2 years. All 3 professors were intrigued. Independent research on the same topic would provide interesting comparison points. They said, would I be willing to present my findings at the same session as David's defense? Absolutely, I told them. I'd be delighted to share my research. David's defense was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early May. I spent the week before preparing my presentation, not just my research findings, but my documentation. Timeline evidence, email correspondence, file metadata, everything organized in a clear, compelling narrative. The night before the defense, David called me. Emily. His voice was nervous, almost shaky. I heard you're presenting research tomorrow. Same topic as my defense. That's right, I said calmly. I'm excited to share what I've been working on. Look, I know things got complicated between us. Maybe we can work something out. Share credit or something. Oh, David, I said, and I could hear the smile in my own voice. I think tomorrow's presentation will clear up any confusion about credit. There was a long pause. Emily, please, don't do this. Do what? I asked innocently. Present my research. Share my findings with the academic community. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Heist. He hung up without another word. Thursday morning arrived gray and rainy. Perfect weather for David's academic funeral. The defense was held in the large conference room on the 3rd floor. David sat at the head of the table, wearing his best suit, looking confident despite our phone call. The 3 committee professors were arranged along one side. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim sat on the other side, and I sat near the back, my laptop bag heavy with evidence. David began his presentation at exactly 9 o'clock. For 45 minutes, I watched him present my research, my ideas, my analysis, my theoretical framework, as his own original work. He was good, I'll give him that. Confident, articulate, engaging. He fielded questions from the committee with ease, because he understood the research. After all, he'd been there for every breakthrough. When he finished, the professors nodded approvingly. Dr. Martinez called it innovative and methodologically sound. Dr. Johnson praised the novel theoretical connections. Dr. Williams said it was exactly the kind of interdisciplinary thinking the field needs. Then Dr. Martinez turned to me. Ms. Johnson, period. Зрение. Мы понимаем, что вы занимались исследованием, связанным с этим. Would you mind sharing your findings? Azert. I'd be happy to, I said, standing up and moving to the front of the room. David's eyes followed me, and I could see the first hint of panic. I opened my laptop and connected to the projector. My first slide appeared on the screen. It was titled Social Media and Adolescent Decision-Making, 2 Years of Independent Research. Before I begin, I said, looking directly at David. Zrenia, I want to note that some of my findings might seem familiar. That's because this research has been ongoing since my second year in the program. I clicked to my second slide. A timeline showing the development of my research, with key dates and milestones. The earliest entry was dated 18 months before David and I had started collaborating. David's face went white. For the next 30 minutes, I presented not just my research findings, but the story of my research, how I developed my initial hypothesis, how I'd refined my methodology, how I'd collected and analyzed my data. And with each slide, I showed documentation. Email timestamps, file creation dates, draft versions with revision histories, photos from my workspace, conference presentation materials. The professors began exchanging glances. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, studying my timeline. Dr. Johnson started taking notes. Dr. Williams looked back and forth between David and me. "This is fascinating, Ms. Johnson, period," Dr. Martinez said slowly. "But I'm confused about something. Mr. Morrison just presented very similar research. Almost identical, in fact." "I noticed that too," I said calmly. "Which is why I brought along some additional documentation." I clicked to my next slide. Email correspondence between David and me, dated 8 months earlier. The email where he'd first approached me about collaboration. His own words, captured in digital amber. "I think our research could be incredibly complementary." "As you can see," I continued, "Mr. Morrison and I did work together for several months. We had what I believed was a collaborative partnership." Click dot. Another slide. Screenshots from our shared Google Drive dot, showing document creation dates and revision histories. My name on file after file dot. Statistical analyses I'd created. Theoretical frameworks I'd developed. "However," I said, my voice steady and professional. "Зрение, как вы можете видеть из этих временных меток? The foundational work for this research predates our collaboration by over a year." The room was completely silent. David looked like he was going to be sick. I clicked to my final slide. A side-by-side comparison. David's thesis outline on the left. My original research proposal from 15 months earlier on the right point. Identical methodology. Identical theoretical framework. Even identical phrasing in several sections. That's when Dr. Martinez stood up. "Mr. Morrison point," she said, her voice ice cold. "Do you have an explanation for these similarities?" David opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was collaborative research. Sarah was my research assistant." "Research assistant." Dr. Johnson's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Morrison, I have emails here showing Ms. Johnson presenting this research at conferences, listed as co-presenter, not research assistant." "And dot," Dr. Williams added, consulting her notes. "Zrenia, согласно Ms. Johnson's documentation, she was conducting this research independently for a full year before you two began collaborating." David's defense crumbled in real time. Under questioning from the committee, he admitted that yes, our work had been collaborative. Yes, I had contributed significantly to the research. Yes, he had deleted our shared files. No, he couldn't explain why he'd submitted the work as his sole contribution. The committee deliberated for exactly 12 minutes. When they returned, Dr. Martinez spoke for all of them. "Mr. Morrison point. Swing this committee finds clear evidence of academic misconduct." Your thesis defense is rejected. Your case will be referred to the Academic Integrity Board. Pending their investigation, you are suspended from the graduate program. She turned to me. Ms. Johnson, period. Logically, we'd like to discuss the possibility of you defending this research as your dissertation. Based on the documentation you've presented, it's clearly your work. David walked out of the room without a word. I never saw him again. The Academic Integrity Board investigation took 6 weeks. They found overwhelming evidence of plagiarism and academic misconduct. David was expelled from the program. His graduate student status revoked. The university also flagged his undergraduate transcripts, effectively ending any chance of him pursuing graduate work elsewhere. I defended my dissertation that August. The research I'd spent 3 years developing, the work David had tried to steal, became the foundation for my doctoral degree. Dr. Rodriguez called it one of the strongest dissertations she'd ever advised. I had job offers from 4 universities before I'd even graduated. But the real satisfaction came 6 months later. I was at a conference in Chicago when I ran into Dr. Kim Point, David's former advisor. "Emily," she said, shaking her head. "I owe you an apology. I should have seen what David was doing." "How could you have known?" I asked Dot. "That's just it," she said. After your presentation, I went back through David's previous work. His coursework, his qualifying exams, his early research proposals. There were patterns, ideas that seemed too sophisticated for his level of experience, methodologies that didn't match his previous capabilities. She paused, looking uncomfortable. "I think you weren't his first victim, Emily. I think David built his entire graduate career on other people's work." So, that revelation should have made me angry. Instead, it made me feel something else entirely. Relief. Relief that I'd documented everything. Relief that I'd trusted my instincts when something felt wrong. Relief that I'd had the courage to fight back. And relief that other students wouldn't have to go through what I'd experienced. My research on social media and adolescent decision-making was published in 3 major journals. It's been cited over 200 times in the past year. I'm now an assistant professor at a prestigious university, continuing the work that David tried to steal. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been so obsessive about documentation. If I hadn't kept backup files. If I hadn't saved every email and screenshot. David might have gotten away with it. He might have built a career on my work. But here's what I learned from that experience. In academia, as in life, trust is earned, not given. Collaboration is powerful, but documentation is protection. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's simply telling the truth. David Morrison tried to steal 2 years of my life's work. Instead, he handed me the keys to my career. My documentation didn't just save my research. It proved my competence, my integrity, and my dedication. It showed every professor in that room exactly the kind of scholar I was. The irony is perfect. David thought he was taking my work. What he actually did was showcase it. He thought he was ending my career. What he actually did was launch it. Justice isn't always swift. But when it comes, it's often more satisfying than any revenge you could plan. If you enjoyed watching this academic betrayal unravel into perfect justice, there are countless more stories of people who thought they could steal their way to success. only to discover that the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.